our generation didn't believe work was always fun. So what I see now in the younger generations I'm hearing often is that they cannot handle certain jobs because they're dealing with difficult people, and it's bad for their mental health.
The words tourism and hotels have started to elicit maybe a negative feeling and a negative interpretation just with all of the building and everything that's going on.
We lack someone that has the balls to step on many toes in order to execute this. What is it that we're lacking?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think courage is one of them. Willpower is...
I could have said courage.
What, you want to sit in my chair porque siéntate en mi stool? No, but you should be listening.
Be
right?
open.
You should be listening to the community. And frankly, we've always been only wanted to help. We would want to be that hero. And you can be a hero, right? If you say, I'm the one that's going to change the strategy. I'm the one that's going to change the strategy for Aruba because this is not what Aruba's future should be like.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, I'm Mauro.
And I'm Giulia.
And Giulia meant to say welcome to the Self-Making Podcast.
Sorry.
Sa kita, second episode ko na sa si junto, and it's the first episode that we interview a guest together. So bear with us. We want to start by saying off that we're in a beautiful location today that ironically enough we can't really show because we had to cover it with curtains because the sun is way too bright this morning. But we're recording today at Joya by Iberostar. Lo que nos purpose season AHATA, depending on the guest and the topic, we want to try and switch things up, get out the studio and record on location and try to make it match the topic of today. So that's why we're here. Si bosa na yung Joya ainda, by the way, the pool is amazing, amazing amenities. Y comida fora, lo que está Cima, Bucatini, Anto Maria, e tres restaurantes, incredible food, cu local discounts ang dami, 2,000 boso pasa. Before we go over to Giulia, mi karbisa tambe dankine prome official sponsor ko no sa season aki. Kutata Koiman, shout out pa Koiman. E prome episode ko sa graba, so the previous one, no sa grabele ding no studio. Ora Giulia Bing, ela pone mi asi full makeover, pues ela bisa giden ta shinishi, ta skur.
It was giving man cave.
Sì, da dono tigi man cave.
Very
vibes.
serious.
Passa skur. Dus, ku Koiman su sponsor ora, e Giulia su art direction, no sa decorate un tiki, sila mas light, no sa busca tur material para custom tables, e shelving tur costa custom made ku material di Koiman. No si un video kun no sa pone Giulia Verf, ando Giulia Verf mi dak tame per ongeluk. Pero no sabay supposed to say when we get there. We'll see, moving on to the topic of today. Mi dabay laga Giulia introduce nos guest the hour officially.
Yes, today we have with us Tisa LaSorte. Welcome. Thank you so much for not only, little clap. I'm holding the mic so it's a bit awkward. Thank you so much for not only coming on our podcast, but also being the first guest that we're filming as co-hosts. So that's
I'm honored.
Very exciting for us. And for those of you that don't know, Tisa LaSorte is the CEO of AHATA, the Aruba Hotel and Tourism Association, for the past 6 going on 7 years now. Yeah, almost 7 years. And a quick question, do you prefer if I call you the CEO of AHATA or the president? Because I wasn't sure. I saw both on your profile, LinkedIn profile.
The title includes both, but I prefer to be called Tisa.
Okay. Tisa LaSorte of AHATA. needs no title in front of it. Or if not, I could just call you Miss President throughout the whole
No, thank
the
you.
whole episode. We can go into the nitty-gritty of the of AHATA as well later on, but I kind of wanted to start off with something a little bit different. So what you see before you is this game that I've had for a couple of years. It's called We're Not Really Strangers, and it's a conversational game that is broken down into 3 different levels. So the first one is perception or impression, and then it goes to connection, and then the last one's reflection. So it's just a cool way to break the ice. So I only put level 1 out there. We're just going to start easy. If you want, you can grab the top of the card, like the card.
Just the top card?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to turn it around.
So now I have to ask you this question?
Yes.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how messy do you think my car is?
Oh, no.
1 being cleanest, 10 a complete disaster. And explain.
Ela pondravo, you know?
Yeah, she's looking at me.
Ela pondravo.
On a scale of 1 is clean, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think you're probably a 2.5 to 3.
I guess 3 tame.
I think why is that? Because you're very, very busy, and I'm sure you go from meetings to meetings, so you probably have to leave a lot of things in your car and maybe prep, paperwork, what have you. So my idea is that you have backup things in your car, but that you leave it organized. Or maybe you get back from a meeting and you like throw it in the back seat or something. I don't know. Is that accurate?
I would say a 2.
Okay.
Because the only thing I have that I think is like extra in the car that's like you could call messy is like my shopping bags.
Okay.
My reusable
In the
shopping
trunk.
bags that are like, no, they're in the trunk. Then you have to go all the way to the back of the car, open the trunk. So no, they're like next to me,
Okay,
right?
got
So
it.
that's a little messy.
Okay.
But
So
everything
other-
else I take out.
Okay. Quando
I don't
questions
have kids, so that helps.
Quando questions per guest, you want to do like 3?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good idea.
Same stack?
Yeah, same stack.
Sì, perché agora tudo doce biati, so we can do that.
I wouldn't grab all the way at the bottom because I have wild cards down there that are like actions. Like
They're
you have
two
to
wild
do.
cards.
Yeah. Just grab more from the
I
top.
don't want to do wild cards.
Have you run around outside on the
scared
balcony?
Sorry, I made a mess.
All good.
Okay.
Not like your car.
What character would I play in a movie? Character in a movie.
I'll let Mauro answer this one.
I have to start, no?
Yeah.
Mita Sinti, I think you would be like the shifu. Mita kere.
The what?
The what?
The shifu, the one that offers like the life-changing advice, you know?
Oh, that's
There's a
nice.
word
But
for
what
that.
movie is that?
Okay, Mr.
I don't know.
Miyagi.
Karate
I
Kid?
think
I
Mr.
knew
Miyagi.
you were going to say
Like
Karate
those,
Kid.
I get it.
Like Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, that's a nice
I think that would be
compliment.
you. Like the supporting character of the lead role that
Yeah.
gives him like the life-changing advice.
Sort of like that. I like sort of more a little like I tend to be in the lead role because of my job, but I actually would rather just sort of be on the side and do
sideline?
my job. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting.
All right, next one. What about me is most strange or unfamiliar to you? Either one of you.
I have to think about this one.
Yeah, I'll
What
let you
about
take
you
this
is
one.
most strange or unfamiliar? You know what's funny? You remind me of a lot of my mom. So I feel like I have a pretty good sense of what kind of person you are because of that. I mean, you also know her, and you're both in high level functions, jobs. So it requires a certain level of responsibility and just stature in general. So I don't know if there's anything strange or unfamiliar. I think we had a coffee a few weeks ago where we went a bit more into your background. I think back then that was maybe most unfamiliar to me, is how you ended up in
Yeah.
the position of Tisa AHATA. So
And how about you? Because Mauro didn't really know me at all.
yeah.
So that was my first impression of you when we had that
Yeah.
coffee. You know, it might sound like a lazy answer, but I just a lot of times don't picture how a person is. I just show up open to however you may be. I did assume though that you're good with people based on your job,
Interesting.
but you just don't know the truth if they just put up a character for that meeting.
True.
And then when they get in the car, you know, they just wind down, and then the truth
And they're like,
comes. Yeah, exactly.
Done with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Some people, they even explain it, they feel like they have to wear a mask when they're in public and with other people, especially people that are more introverted, that they have to play it up. And
I don't think I'm an extrovert necessarily, but
Okay.
I am willing and able to be out there and have always had to because of the jobs that I've had. But I actually think I would benefit from wearing a mask once in a while because I'm actually told that I'm too expressive, that people can see what I'm thinking on my face. I've never thought that was a negative thing because I figured that's transparent. I don't have to hide what I'm thinking, and I'm very outspoken. So sometimes maybe a mask would be a good thing.
I don't know, I think it just shows authenticity, right? What you see is what you get.
That's what I think. But
Yeah,
not everybody agrees with that. Yeah.
But I struggle with the same thing, so I also see it as positive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But then, like, are you an extrovert though? Just let's say you go to a networking event, or you just go through a day that you had to have a lot of conversations and listen attentively. At the end of the day, are you exhausted or not really?
Oh, is that one of the definitions?
Well,
But by
yeah.
definition, sort of, if you're an extrovert, you're energized by interactions, and when you're an introvert, you recharge your battery by being alone.
Okay.
Correct.
Oh, okay, wait, okay. So, see, again, I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle because I believe that I can go to events, not know anybody, and find my way and find somebody to talk to, right? So, in a way, that's a bit extrovert type, right? That I don't shy away from that. But I do definitely have moments and need my time to recharge by myself. So I panic literally if I look at my week ahead and I realize that all day long and every night I have to be out there and interacting and with people, and I don't have like an evening where I can just be alone to recharge. So yeah.
Well, I think that's normal. Most people are on the spectrum. It's not
Yeah.
black or white, one or the other. You tend to fall. Some people fall more extreme in extroversion or not. We should have all the guests do the 16 personalities, MBTI. Myers-Briggs, do you know that? The
Yeah,
personality test?
In the US, you do that through your work all the time.
Right,
Yeah.
right. They have like different types of. I did one as well. I just can't caliper test. I don't know if you have. You
I
ever
can't
heard
remember
of
the
that?
name of. Yes, but I can't remember the name of mine.
Yeah. It's nice though, because I feel like it's good to have a reflection of your strengths and your weaknesses and
Yeah.
what you should focus on. So
Agreed.
yeah. But speaking of your career, maybe one of the first questions I wanted to start off with is, what is something that you think is most surprising about your career trajectory, about yourself, that people might not know?
I think that you don't necessarily always continue on the path that you thought when you started out.
Okay.
Right? And that one of the things that I believe I've learned is that basic skills can be translated into different sectors and arenas. So, for example, in the business world, if you have the basic business skills and you understand that, it's about finding something that you can sell to a customer,
Right.
and that's something the customer actually wants, and you can offer good, sort of those basic business principles don't change. So it's about learning specifics maybe of a specific sector, but it doesn't change the basic principles. Be transparent, be honest, satisfy your customer, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that was most surprising, that I've been able to go from one, I used to be in the broadcast industry, journalism, then I went, into the tourism sector, and that can be seamless. And that even all of that, even my journalism background, for example, I think helps me today.
Absolutely.
Because this whole ability to listen, because everybody thinks it's just about asking questions, but it's also about listening, and asking all the right questions is a key sort of skill to have in many, many jobs, especially in management.
Definitely. And I know that you started out actually in TV and radio. I know you were on Channel 13 here at Tele Aruba.
Yeah.
And then you lived in the States and you worked for a radio station. You started your own sports radio station, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, not my own, but
No,
I
helped
launched
create
it.
one.
Yeah, so for this company, they hired me to help launch a new sports station. That was what happened was, if anybody follows Major League Baseball, there was an expansion of the Major League Baseball league, and there was a new team called the Arizona Diamondbacks, and so I launched the radio station that was going to be the home of that team.
Okay,
and then you
nice.
had to create a whole sports, programming around the actual games.
And that was back in the 90s.
Oh my goodness. 90s, yes.
90s? Was that
90s, late 90s, early, yeah.
was that tough for you, like being a woman in the sports industry
Yes.
back in the day?
Well, remember, I was a young woman. I was from the Caribbean. I was short. Accent, right? You're a foreigner, basically, an accent. So there were that's a lot against you, right? To go into this world that is literally a man's world. Only 1% of the jobs like mine in the U.S. were by women. So yes, and at first there's a lot of judgment and lack of expectation, let me say it that way, and hurdles. But I've always believed that the only way you overcome those is just by getting things done, right? By showing results.
Right.
And then that's how you sort of win people over, is by showing that you're there to actually get things done, the right things done.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you miss those jobs, the radio and TV shows?
People ask me all the time if I miss living in the U.S. or I miss those jobs. My personality is such that I very much, when I move forward, I move forward. I don't look back a lot. So I'm very grateful for that experience. I thought it was very fascinating. I believe I've had a very interesting life because of those jobs that I've had. But I don't at all think of, I wish I was still there.
Right. So we're not going to see you back on Tele Aruba at some point in the future.
Oh, well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are times where, frankly, I feel like there's a lack of neutral journalism on this island. So that sometimes does give me like the itch, to do it. But the world is different now. We have you guys.
Something that I wanted to ask you, because when I saw the text that Giulia was preparing and she summarized all the notes from our meeting, you studied communication, then you worked in TV. Now you are, let's not say director of the title, so you're Tisa from AHATA. One anecdote that my dad used to tell me back then when I was choosing what career path to take, I was stressing out because it felt like a big decision that's going to define the rest of your life. He told me an anecdote from Steve Jobs that he saw in a Steve Jobs movie. You're smiling, so I don't know if you know the anecdote already.
I'm waiting.
Okay,
It's
waiting.
like I remember there's something. But
Okay, so he said that back then, when he didn't know what he wanted to do, he took a calligraphy class. And then in the moment, it just felt like something pointless. He just wanted to do that instead of just staying around at home, basically, so try and be productive with his time. And then what ended up happening was years later when he invented Apple. Apple was the first computer to have different typefaces and the most artistic and beautiful typographies as well. So he told me that whatever you do now, just as long as you do something and don't sit and be idle, it might make sense down the road. So one question that I want to ask you was, looking back, was there a moment where you did something or you studied something, you worked somewhere that didn't seem to make sense for you, but now it just helped you?
Yes. Yes, actually, when I first went to the U.S. from Aruba, so what happened was I was back in Aruba after I graduated from college, and I was working at Aruba as a journalist, as a reporter. But then I fell in love with this American man who was living here, and we ended up moving back to the U.S. So then I had to go through this process of, getting a work permit and things like that. And then as I was waiting to go back to my career, which I was with TV, radio, journalism, I worked retail. Right? So I just said, like you said, or like your dad said, I didn't want to do nothing. So I worked retail in a department store. And I worked at the cosmetics counter, and I worked in the fur. Those days, fur wasn't negative yet, right? In the fur store. And there's a lesson I learned from those jobs. Even though, retail's a low-paying job, you get a discount at the store, which was helpful at the time. We were just beginning. But what I learned there is a lesson I never forgot, is that you cannot judge a book by its cover. So for example, when you work in a fur store that's an expensive item, people will walk in and you would want to judge them by what they're wearing, if they can afford the coat or not, for example, and you learn not to do that. So it's a very basic lesson, but it's a lesson that has always been useful.
Wow.
That is great.
My second question is so a lot of times when I eat lunch, I'm almost like an iPad kid. I need to watch something. I just can't eat in silence. So one thing that I used to watch a lot during my high school days was Shark Tank. And then one thing that Mark Cuban kept repeating is that if he would give any advice to any young person that wants to, start being on the path to be successful, he would advise everyone to be in sales at least at some point. So you being in retail, what's something that you learned from doing sales that helped you?
Well, actually, in the retail, I did sales after that.
Okay.
So after that, so in retail, yeah, it was so basic. It's the kind of retail in the department store where they sort of come to you, right? Like
Gotcha.
you don't have
If
to
they
go
need
out
something.
and you don't have to go out and find the customer. So that to me is a little less salesy. But after that, when I was in Aruba still, I worked for a company that developed timeshare resorts. And the way they did that is they would go from their first resort, whoever was a timeshare owner, we would sell them stock and bonds. Basically, they would become the investors in the next hotel. So me and an older man would be the ones that would find these timeshare owners, and we would do presentations to them and sell them on basically buying in for an interest they would earn later. And with that money is what we were able to develop the next hotel. That was more sales oriented. And there again, what you learn, that is where I learned to also, when you're dealing, because there you dealt with couples. And I learned to always include the wife. Because in those days, often it was the man making the decision, right? They were the ones that, with the pocketbook in those days. But you cannot exclude the wife. And I was also a younger woman. So I was in my 20s, early 20s. So it was, if you didn't include the wife, she would not want the man to connect with me or make a decision that was positive for me. So you learn little tidbits like that.
It's true. I mean, the studies show that 80% of all purchases are made by the woman.
Yes.
Always. Even
Yes.
big purchases like a car or a TV, you might think, oh, the guy has more knowledge.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the wife has the most
Yeah.
influence on
Yeah.
those big buys.
So you
that
learn
makes
to
a lot
look,
of sense.
yeah, and you learn to look everybody in the eye, to connect with everybody, have the conversation with everybody. Don't ignore the people that are in the room, right? That they're all part of the process.
Let's switch the topic because we do want to cover at least 3 other points before time
Very
runs out.
true. Yeah. We could probably go on and on.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. So I don't want to go into it too much because I know you were on a podcast last year, No Filter in Paradise, where you really broke down what AHATA does. But maybe just for the sake of this episode, could you, short but sweet and in your own words, describe what AHATA does and maybe how it's distinguished from ATA? Because I feel like there's a bit of a misconception and confusion because it sounds so similar. But in your own words, maybe you just explain the
Sure.
differences.
So the ATA, the Aruba Tourism Authority, is the official bureau of Aruba, which falls in the public sector, semi-public sector, that basically handles the marketing for Aruba. So the ATA is responsible basically for bringing tourists to the island, if you want to simplify it, right? Obviously, it's more complicated than that. So that's the public sector. They are a sui generis, which means that there is a tax that is assigned specifically to them. So they have a direct flow of income through this tax that flows through the accommodations, by the way. It's like a room tax that goes directly to them. That's how they are funded. But they fall, they still have a responsibility towards the strategy of the minister, right? So they fall under the public sector and still are connected to the government. So the AHATA, the Aruba Hotel and Tourism Association, is an association that basically represents the private sector. So commerce in the industry. So we have 160 companies that have chosen to be a member. So part of the difference is, in Dutch we also say werkgeversorganisatie, or employers organization, and the definition of that is that you're a representative, an association that these companies have chosen. Right? So that's the difference with like a chamber of commerce, for example. In a case like an AHATA, they choose for you to be their representative. And then what we see as our role, or what our role is to sort of ensure that there is a successful and sustainable long-term industry and economy that we can all therefore benefit from. Because frankly, in any country, right, if you have a productive economy, everybody benefits from that. Everybody feeds off of that somehow. So as the tourism industry is the primary pillar of Aruba's economy, we have found that a lot of companies that you wouldn't think are also members.
Right.
So it's not, so we have 160 members, of which about 30 maybe are hotels, for example. People think we're only hotels, but it's only about 30 that are hotels. And the rest are the other ones you would think, like activity companies, restaurants and other companies like that you expect in the industry. But it's also like lawyers and banks and insurance companies, because basically everybody ends up feeding off of the foreign exchange that we receive through tourism.
I would definitely agree that that's the biggest misconception people have about your organization. They see Aruba Hotel and Tourism and they think, they're representing the big hotel names and they want all the profit, and so the locals maybe feel a little bit neglected by an organization like AHATA. But it's good, I think, also to understand that you also represent the labor market.
Yes, actually, I think, especially, I've been here since 2018 in this position. And for me, it has been crucial, actually, that people understand and that our own members understand that what we're fighting for is actually a productive Aruban economy, right? And therefore, everybody needs to benefit from that. And therefore, you're fighting for the island's benefit, really, and it's not for a specific company's benefit, right? That's the difference. So you're not helping a specific company solving their problem, but you're trying to solve, if there is a problem, you're trying to solve it for the benefit of everybody participating in the industry. So that's a misconception at times. But sometimes, obviously, there's an example of one company that represents the issue. Labor shortage, for example. Everybody's suffering from labor shortage, and it's not just in the tourism, right? Everybody who has a business right now on the island is complaining that they cannot find enough people. That addresses everybody. So when those are the kind of problems that we try to find solutions for. Also, because AHATA has funds, so we also try to use those funds for the benefit of the community. So we're also trying to show that we do want to give back and we do want to support. Some of it has a selfish, ulterior motive, because if you're helping the education sector, by the way, which we do a lot, we donate to social funds so there's more access to education, for example. All of that, in the end, long term, does also have a selfish nature to it, because what you're trying to do is build a better workforce for the future.
Yeah. Definitely. I think labor shortage is definitely something we're going to get into a little bit later in the episode, because I do think it's something important to address. We're all feeling it. I know in our company as well, we have a deficit and one person calls in sick and then the team is short-staffed. And so it creates a lot of pressure
on the rest of the staff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also feel like when we talk about, Aruba and the Aruban community, the words tourism and hotels have started to elicit maybe a negative feeling and a negative interpretation just with all of the building and everything that's going on. I think I've personally brought this topic up during Face the Future quite a bit, where I kind of show this quantity versus quality tourism. Why do we have so many hotels and so many tourists, and we're still struggling maybe to make ends meet. What's interesting actually is that I found out, based on your tip, I read the speech from Don Mazur, which is available on Bati Bleki. That's where I read it. And Don Manzur was a well-known economist on Aruba that was a part of the status aparte.
He was in government, actually.
He was in government, right, and he played a large role during that time. He had a speech, I want to say in 1990, where he talked about the history when Lago closed up until that point, and basically touristic-wise, what had come into play. And that is where I read that he brought up that the government was going to focus on quality over quantity. And I feel like that's a theme that's been playing for 40 years.
Yeah, let me give a little bit of short version of the history. So in the 50s, right, late 50s, the tourism industry was sort of sparked to start off because at the time the oil refinery was losing, they were automating, so then thousands of jobs were being lost, so they needed to kickstart the economy with something else. So that's when tourism was sort of, like came to be, let's say, in the mid-late 50s. My father was involved in that, for full disclosure. Then in the 80s, what happened is the oil refinery was closing. So then in the mid-80s, late 80s, that's when the government was like, okay, now we need to just get that tourism industry growing fast because we need these jobs fast. We need to get a productive economy going fast. So basically they went out and they said, build, 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 build. So the way Don Manzur explains it at the time was also uncontrolled growth. So what they did in the late 80s was they said, we need to focus on uncontrolled growth because we just need to spark the economy. At the time, that was the right decision. Yeah. Right? So since then, what hasn't happened is that the governments after that had to, at one point, say, okay, now we need controlled growth. Right now, we need to figure out what are the parameters, what are we seeing in the future, what has already been given out, which erfpachten or land has already been given out for this kind of development. Let's take inventory, let's say what does this island want, and then create a plan towards that. That never happened afterwards. We've been talking about quality over quantity for a very long time, We've even changed the terminology. It became value over volume. I mean, we've even called it different things. But I believe that what Aruba has not done well yet is actually make the decisions to back that up, right? So we've been talking about it, we've been using words, but we haven't really made the decisions to back that up. So I believe that this negative sentiment, that is clear, and it has been proven. So we cannot deny this negative sentiment that exists, which really was caused by what many feel is overdevelopment. Yeah. So and the issue that I have with it is that I have complete understanding. I'm local, I'm Aruban too, I understand it and I feel it. And I remember how we felt during the pandemic. We were panicking because we realized that we had, no funds. There was no money coming in. But on the other hand, we were like, oh, it's so beautiful and quiet, and look at how clean the beaches are, right? Like we also enjoyed it sort of guiltily in a little way. So, but what I'm saying is that we need to start making decisions, and we're just like right now, the negative response is being targeted towards the person who built the hotel, for example. I cannot blame that person, right? It's sort of, and I give an analogy for this. I go to a bookstore and I buy a book, right? So I buy this book, I read this book, I talk about this book, I publish the pages from the book, and everybody's mad because there's this chapter in this book that has information that should not be published, right? For example. I just bought the book. I didn't write the book. So right now people are targeting the tourists, for example. They're trying to make the tourist feel uncomfortable for being here. They're trying to target the person who built the hotel, for example. They're innocent. They're just trying to come, they were sold something, or they were just coming to enjoy the island and bring their money to the island, as a matter of fact.
So what you're saying is we should be pressuring the government.
Makers. It's the decision makers. It's the one who decided to sell that land or give out that land or gave the building permit or gave the hotel permit. And the other thing that's being ignored is that while everybody's focused on hotels, there have been thousands of vacation rental units that were built all over the island, and that's where a lot of that volume in the last 8 years, most of the volume growth has come from vacation rental units, whether it's houses or condos. So people are creating a certain target, and I understand the sentiment. I want to keep saying that. I understand the sentiment. We all do, I think. We understand the sentiment. But you need to understand the underlying problem and attack the core problem.
Yeah, I read as well that when Lago closed down, there was a 30% unemployment rate. They lost 30% of government funds.
Correct.
And they were grappling and figuring out what to pivot towards, and that's why tourism. But they actually contacted the Dutch government and said, hey, we need help, we need aid. They sent an IMF recovery team to try and help, who advised on a 50% increase in rooms. And it was actually the Aruban government was like, we'll double that. We'll make it 100% growth capacity in 3 years' time. So I think the Aruban government really sort of set this standard of like, we want to get this going, we want to grow as much as possible. And I think I might know the answer, but I'm still curious to hear your perspective. Why do you think this unbalanced growth mentality is still ingrained
I
in
honestly
Aruba?
I've been trying to figure that out, to be
Oh,
quite
okay.
honest, because I asked him, like, because I don't understand how we don't all see the issue, right? And that you don't all want to be, why don't you want to be the hero that changes that, right?
Right.
Like, I wish, no, I shouldn't say that, I don't wish. Too old for this. But I wish somebody, let me say it that way, I wish somebody would want to be that hero. And you can be a hero, right? If you say, I'm the one that's going to change the strategy.
Yeah.
I'm the one that's going to change the strategy for Aruba, because this is not what Aruba's future should be like. Again, you can still be proud of what was done in the past and celebrate it. And again, remember, the success of the industry has been thousands and thousands of employees in the industry that has made this industry successful. That's the
Right.
other thing people forget. When you're trying to dismiss the industry, you're dismissing the work of thousands and thousands of people who have fed their family because of the jobs that they've had in this industry. So we need to give them credit for the work. But the ones that have to make the strategic decisions are usually government, because you can make, and it's, by the way, it's the whole government. Because you can be, let's say, the Minister of Tourism and say, I would like to curb it, but if the Minister of Infrastructure is still giving out land to develop and giving out permits, then nothing changes. And vacation rental has not been regulated yet, for example, right?
True.
We believe the majority, the highest percentage of vacation rentals don't pay taxes. They're not even contributing back to the government. So it's just a matter of making some tough decisions and saying, I'm going to make some changes for the sake of Aruba's future. And the tourism industry itself, I will have members that disagree, obviously, right? Like there's going to be debate within AHATA, right, as to what is right. But in the end, we believe, our point of view is that if you don't control it now, we're going to have more trouble in the future. And you need to protect the future by controlling it now.
Tisa, maybe you should be the hero.
Yeah, no, no. But I do believe quality right now. If we truly believe those words of quality over quantity, again, that requires decisions. That means you need to start giving investment incentives for quality improvement. You need to start put money to fix the roads. You need Aruba to have a higher quality as a destination,
A higher quality of life.
a higher quality of life for everybody.
Yeah.
But that requires some investment then there and making some tough decisions. What does that mean? Do I have to decide? Do I want fewer cruise ships to come to the island, or do I at least want to say I don't want 3 in the same day, because then you're dumping a whole bunch of people on the same day on the island, and then you have more UTVs and you have more cars and you have more people on the beach at the same time. These are decisions we need to be making. We've been very grateful for tourism in the sense that, and we saw it in the pandemic, right? We were very grateful when we recovered fast. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have the courage to manage it.
Do you feel like we're too late with
Well,
turning the tide?
Well, I would say never too late. Obviously, we're too late in the sense that there has been overdevelopment, but it's never too late to try to fix. Giving up is not the solution.
It
either.
shouldn't be. No,
Yeah.
agreed. And then my last question on this topic is, what do you consider, is there a standard that AHATA or maybe the government has that would deem a tourism quality? So like at what point, what do you measure to say these are quality tourists, this is quality tourism, this is what we want to achieve?
Well, the simple one, there's more to it, right? But I'll start with the simple one. The simple one is that if you have a strategy where you say, okay, I don't necessarily want to grow, I don't want to grow more for more tourists to come to the island. So I don't want to grow volume and maybe even get to the point where you say you limit, right? You limit the volume. But you can start replacing the lower spending visitor or guest with a higher spending visitor or guest. So it's sort of like a spending per capita, right? Like a spend per tourist. If you can increase that, then you're
But you
replacing.
can't really control how much tourist spends, right?
Of course you can, because you can attract the higher spender tourists. So, and I don't want to go into too much technical detail how the industry works. It talks about which airlines come and
Right,
which markets they
that's
come
another
from,
thing.
and it gets very technical. But my point is, because you still want to grow the economy, because the people who would debate us on this are saying, but you have to grow the economy, right? You need to keep growing the economy. But we're going to have to start growing it what I call vertically now instead of horizontally, which is volume. So you're going to have to do that via value. Right? And via value, you're going to have to then invest in the product. So Aruba has to be the kind of product that I'm willing to pay for. That means solving the labor shortage too, by the way, because you can't give service without it. So it's a lot of things, investing in people, investing in infrastructure, et cetera. But then it's also, how do you grow it? You build value, and then you replace a lower spending visitor with a higher spending visitor. And then you're not growing number, you're just growing income.
So from the glimpse that you just gave us, the Evorbel, the Kami Airlines, for example, I assume that there are many different tactics that the government can use or other organizations to start switching towards that demographic of tourists, right? So, for example, changing the cruise lines, changing the airlines, stuff like that. Is it feasible? Is it easy to do?
It's not easy because, for example, an airline or airport cannot just say no to an airline, right, that wants to come. But there are decisions you make, that there are parameters you can set in place. I think the cruise ship example is the easiest one to explain because you can just say Aruba doesn't have the capacity to then do more than 2 cruise ships a day, for example. Now, when we have 3 cruise ships on the same day, that's a whole lot of people you're bringing on the island. It's a lot of stopping of traffic. It's a lot of people on the beach at the same time.
Tourism.
So there are decisions like that. I mean, there's more, right? There's more tactics. You can use marketing. Who do you market to? What do you put in your, like we have the online ED card now, right? Could there, when we talked a lot about we want people who are protecting our nature, years ago we had a pledge, that you could, and some other countries have done that too, where you want the tourists to do like a pledge that I'm going to protect nature and be kind to nature when I'm there. You could put that in the online ED card, for example, right? So that everybody who's coming here, at least by plane, because on the ships they don't fill that out, that they at least get to see that pledge, right? And have to click on it before they get their permission to enter, kind of thing. I mean, there's a variety. It's not a simple answer, I guess is what I'm saying. It's going to require a plan. And it's going to, all of those things will be an integral plan that you have to attack all of those things at the same time. So it's about who you attract. It's about the message you send them, the ones who are coming. It's about elevating the product of the island itself, that you can therefore create value and charge more. It's a combination of things.
What sounds to me is that the plan sounds, if someone were to make a plan, it would be a master plan and very intricate. My experience from doing Face the Future this year and from participating in Votopaking in 2020-21, it's something that I hear time and time again, not ministers, but political candidates from every single party mentioning or selling themselves at this point. So either all politicians have that same interest at heart, or at least they use it to get votes, whichever it may be. But even the ones that do manage to sit now and form the government, do they now have to start making such a plan together, or did many of them already have a solid plan in place, do you think? Or can you not comment on this?
I would say that the parties that are now forming a coalition are in the process of combining their individual visions and plans into their agreement, their government agreement. Regeerakkoord. And that is going to be their basic plan. But in the end, they also have to listen to the community, right? So they have to listen to the stakeholders and make sure that that is incorporated and not just by their own vision. We've had some politicians or ministers in the past when we've been in meetings and given recommendations and suggestions, and they'll say things like, "What, you want to sit in my chair? Porque sinta en mi stool?" No, but you should be listening.
Be
right?
open.
You should be listening to the community. And frankly, we've always been only wanted to help, right? When we give recommendations, it's to help solve a problem.
The common good of Aruba.
The common good of Aruba, exactly. So let's work on it together instead of this distrust. So the distrust comes from not believing in each other's that their goal is not a selfish goal, right? To trust each other, you want to believe that you all have the same goal, which is the benefit of Aruba. So we need to overcome all of that. And we also need, because we talked about a master plan, we also need, because it's one thing to write a plan, it's another to put it into action. So what Aruba has not done well either is to take all these plans that, by the way, there are already tons of them. A lot of meetings, I've been in many committees, right? And not just me, way before me, many committees. There's a lot of plans, but we don't necessarily follow those plans. So we put them, the joke always is nantating lachi, right? They're just sort of hidden somewhere.
But then why is it? Is it that we lack, so obviously we lack execution, but do we lack the interest to execute it? Do we lack someone that has the balls to step on many toes in order to execute this? What is it that we're lacking?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think courage is one of them. Willpower is...
I could have said courage.
That's okay. I'm trying to be polite. But I think courage is one of them. I think just plain decision-making, willpower is another one, right? Not everything that has to be done is going to be popular, like in a political world, for example, right? I think in the political world, you want short-term wins, right? You need short-term wins because before that next election. And some of these decisions have long-term consequences or long-term results, and they're not as sexy. So that makes it harder for these decisions to be made. So yeah, the dream is that we're all gonna just let's just do it right, right? So in that sense, you want people that are not concerned about their political future, but are only concerned about which solutions do we need today. Now, that's not the real world, so we need to live realistically.
Right.
So therefore, you need to work within that system and still trying to come up with solutions. But long-term thinking is key. And you see it in business too. There's a huge difference between short-term thinkers and long-term thinkers. And the example of that always I give the analogy is, we do a press moment because we're standing and we built a park and we're proud that we built this park because we created this natural area for people and we're all standing in front and we take a picture and we send a press release out that we built this park and everybody forgot that you need to water the trees and the plants. And then in a month, the trees are all dead. That doesn't help us, right? So that long-term thinking is key.
It's tricky too. Sorry, and then we can go to the next topic.
No,
Pero
it's good.
look, again, going back to my experience doing political shows, what I did notice, especially going back to the point where you said the person that does have the courage, let's say, to execute this and do the right thing, and it's going to be a long-term win and maybe even short-term consequences and then long-term win, I feel that a lot of people in the community lack critical thinking abilities. And this I noticed doing the political shows, how many people either just vote for a party that their parents vote for. How many people just say, I don't even want to vote because it's just overwhelming. I don't know who to vote for. And they don't even make use of the right that they have. So many of them, I just ask myself, how many of them would even be able to comprehend that long-term benefit if it's even explained and marketed to the local community, It
is hard, and this is again why we have this system the way we have it, right? Because that most of these issues that you want to talk about, it's true that not everybody can grasp it, right? It's just reality. But this is again why we just want people who just really, like you said, you want those critical thinkers. So you need to, a lot of that comes from education too, right? We need to make sure our education level is high. Education level, when you have high education levels, you can fight corruption, you can have more responsible people, so there's a lot we can do by just elevating. So it's again about figuring out what is the core problem and then addressing that core problem. But you're right, like for example, I'll give you a perfect example of something that governments have a hard time doing that would be, it's a pretty innocent example. BTW. We've talked for years about changing the tax system into a VAT system, indirect taxes, and we've called it the BTW, sort of like the Netherlands has a BTW. Most of us believe that is the right system for Aruba. It's a simpler tax system, right? It's a fair tax system, and everybody contributes to it. So even if you are, let's say, an undocumented person that's not paying wage taxes, for example, when you're consuming, you're paying the BTW. And it's a better system than the BBO, for example. But the reason politicians would have a hard time with the introduction of a BTW is to do it properly, you would have to sort of get rid of some other sort of direct taxes, right? And then sort of roll them into this BTW, which means that tax rate is going to sound high, right? And then people will not grasp it. People will forget that maybe the import duties are lower or whatever. They won't realize that. And all they know is, well, BBO was 7%, and now you're telling me BTW is 11%? How is this? They think they're paying more. It's very hard to explain, right? And then that makes them shy away from making this proper decision for the island. Understandably, but to me, it's sort of like, let's find a way how we can explain it.
I think politics is a popularity game at this point. We see people join the list here, and we're like, what do they know about politics? But they're purely there to get votes, and that's it, right? And I think also a lot of politicians know that they need to be well liked, and in order to be well liked, they make decisions that are more short term, so you can get results within your term, so that you can be reelected next term. It's not just an Aruban thing; it's everywhere, right?
So it takes a little more effort then.
It does, and I also think Aruba likes to, I don't want to say blacklist, but when you make a mistake, it's like you get burned. It's like, if I feel like as a politician, it's kind of a tricky position to be in here, because if you misstep or do something that maybe is more controversial, or like you say, steps on a lot of people's toes, they sort of get burned in a way where they won't get reelected. And so that person that might be good for long-term visions won't be reelected because of a short-term
or elected to begin with, right? If they're sort of telling the truth. No, that's definitely, and that relates to what you were asking too, I think. But this is definitely, in Aruba, we do, one of the things I noticed, because I lived for 20 years in the US and then I came back, one of the things I noticed too is that, like, I'm a pretty outspoken person, for example, right? And I'm opinionated. And people have a hard time with that, right? Like, so people wanted me to be softer and quieter, for example, especially being a female, right? They don't expect you to have sort of
So
strong,
assertive.
a strong, exactly. And so you have that too in Aruba, where that's hard for people to accept. And then you have that you have this culture of, if you disagree with me, then you're my enemy, versus we're just having a discussion. Like some of my best friends I have great discussions with, right? Like, I love that kind of dynamic. But in Aruba, that's difficult. So we have all of that in our culture. Indeed, doesn't help us to be able to make the right decisions and move forward. But I still haven't given up on the idea that we still all want to do the work that it takes to figure out how we can explain it and how we explain that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think we need more non-judgmental, open-minded culture. And I think with the newer generations, I think the younger generations
That's the hope I have. I look
Yeah.
at the younger generations, and that's
us.
the hope I
That's
have.
you and me, just
Yeah,
so you know.
that's yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
I count on you guys for changing that. Yeah,
We're not 30 yet, you know.
there you go. But you do also need to know the work ethic is also different.
No. Well,
So it flows.
look
it
at
flows.
all of this highlighted text. We're ready to attack
It
that point.
flows
Trust me.
beautifully, because given your involvement with the labor force on the island, what do you think our biggest issue is with the labor shortage that the hospitality industry is currently experiencing?
All
All
industries.
industries.
That's so true.
Yeah, all industries. Though it's hard for
The tourism Aruba.
Yeah, but even the hospitality industry, it's harder, obviously, because you can't work from home in the hospitality industry, right? So it's
Right.
like
It's
a double,
labor
it's like a
intensive.
double, triple problem. Yeah. So we already, before the pandemic, we already had issues for the hospitality industry specifically. We had a challenge that a lot of people in Aruba didn't want to work weekends, didn't want to work nights, and obviously Horeca is a 24/7 industry. So we already had that issue. Aruba is small. Then post-pandemic, that whole feeling of, I'm willing to work less. Pre-pandemic, people were telling their employers, I want to work less, but keep my salary the same. Post-pandemic, it was like, reduce my salary, I just want to work less, right? Like the whole sort of priority shifted. And then on top of that, we've been developing and growing while our labor force cannot keep up. Then you also have the Z generation who's like, you know what? I only want to work 4 days a week, or I don't even want a full-time job. I just want to have clients here and there, and I do projects, and I want to sort of manage my time. I very much believe in, my balanced life, as we call it all the time. So it's like a whole bunch of things that came together at the same time that's just making it more and more challenging to be able to have the level of labor force that you need.
Definitely.
Yeah, you're going to let me quote the thing I wanted to quote?
Go quote it.
Okay, Tisa, do you know who Mr. Beast is?
Mr. Beast? No.
Okay, so Mr. Beast is a 26-year-old YouTuber, the biggest YouTuber in the world. He managed to create a platform that's worth a few billions, and even turned it larger than YouTube, created, I think it was chocolate companies, snacks, all that stuff. So for 26, he's doing very well. And they just released a podcast episode with him, I think it was yesterday, 1 or 2 days ago, where they quoted him saying, I wouldn't be where I am today if I would have prioritized my mental health and work-life balance. I know now, more than before, that mental health and work-life balance are more relevant than ever compared to back then. Still now, you find that top 1% of people, even if they're young, that they do just prioritize work. But based on what you said, that so many people right now just take mental health into account. Looking back to a few years ago, not saying that year, but going back to a few years ago, do you think people just didn't prioritize mental health as much and work-life balance as they do right now?
I think it's a little more complicated than that. I think that, first of all, I think that what happens is that in the younger generations, everybody hopes and believes they can be Mr. Beast, right? So I believe that you need to look at employment, that in a way, that's also a contract. So what you have is, if you're an entrepreneur, you have contracts with clients, for example, right? An employment contract is also a contract. You're basically saying, I'm going to do this for you, and you pay me this much, right? So it's still a contract also. It's just different because you normally have to conform to some rules because it's sort of a larger workspace and you have less control over that. But it's still a contract. You can negotiate before you sign that contract. So I just wanted to put that out there first. In terms of mental health, I would say that indeed the newer generations have improved society in general by allowing us to talk more about mental health, right? So it's become more prevalent. It can't be ignored anymore, right? Like the conversation is out there, probably not as much still as we want it to be, but it's at least out there more, and they're paying more attention to it. I think that's great. I wouldn't say that we didn't prioritize it. We probably just called it stress at the time. We knew when we knew when our bodies needed rest. We knew when, we needed a break. We knew, but I believe like with most things, somewhere in the middle is the truth. So I think also, for example, my generation, where we see the difference, this is perspective, right? Like, so this is a generational perspective now. I see it in the hospitality industry, for example. My generation, we would have difficult clients, right? And we'd say, yeah, it's a difficult client. We almost would pride ourselves in being able to deal with that difficult client. It's a challenge that we would take on. And then if we could turn that into a positive situation, we would feel victorious. And it was part of the challenge that we actually enjoyed in the job. I'm not saying it's fun. It's a challenge, but work is a challenge. So our generation didn't believe work was always fun. So what I see now in the younger generations I'm hearing often is that they cannot handle certain jobs because they're dealing with difficult people, and it's bad for their mental health. So I believe that you cannot be, in my mind, you cannot be that extreme either. We don't live in the fantasy land where everybody's going to be easy to deal with and everything is peaches and cream. So somewhere in the middle has to be that truth. So is there more attention to mental health, and that's positive? Yes, absolutely. Can we always use that and fall upon that as a reason why I can't do certain work? That can't be right either. So somewhere in the middle must be the sweet spot.
I'm curious, or I'm also just like speculating here as well. I wonder if one of the things with the younger generation, I mean myself included, is taking things maybe personally. When we talk about giving feedback and dealing with difficult customers, that you have to realize that the person you're dealing with, it's not a reflection of you.
Exactly.
And you have to learn and cope how to let that sort of slide off of your back. I think that's one skill that maybe needs to be learned and refined a bit more. I think the other thing too is there might be frustration with the younger generation, especially on Aruba, that we are in such a labor-intensive, we are like industry, we almost don't have a choice but to end up in some type of customer service position when we have dreams and aspirations to do so much more, and maybe we don't see that platform or that environment to foster that on Aruba.
I will object to saying so much more, because that is implying that in a customer relating job that is lesser. So I object to that first.
I agree with that. But you did mention earlier on in the podcast when you had your retail job, you said, it's like a very low paying job. So I think I'm talking specifically about income.
Yeah, but a customer-facing job not all of them are lower income. That's what I'm trying to say. So it depends on the job, but there are many customer-facing jobs that are not lower income. A front desk agent is not an easy job, but they get very high commissions from upselling, for example, right? Like so all I'm saying is let's not make those assumptions too quickly. But now I lost my train of thought on the actual core of the question.
It happens to me too a lot. Don't worry. One thing that I wanted to say though. I would still point the finger a bit at social media, I would say. And I'm going to tell you why. Linking it, I had a conversation with Rosabel Ilis once. And then she mentioned, I know you know her because you mentioned her in the No Filter episode. And I saw yesterday. Yeah. Pero she mentioned something about, I think it was a conversation about Michael Jordan in basketball. And they asked, what are the odds to be able to replicate a Michael Jordan in this era? So like a regen, let's say, of him. And then they mentioned that just the fact that back then he didn't have that social media and he wasn't so reachable by the press where all the things they say about you, all that distraction, how they can get in your head. That factor already plays a huge role that athletes nowadays have to deal with. And just looking back, I know that right now, since all of us have a smartphone, I'm consuming content 24/7. Like I said, I even watch videos while I eat lunch or breakfast. I think that you just have so much overstimulation and things to compare yourself to, and then everyone is convinced right now that they can be a Mr. Beast, they can work just 4 hours a week, they can just go base themselves in Bali and pay $1,000 a month and live off of that. So I think in this aspect, social media did play a role in this new generation.
Yeah, and that goes back to, actually now I remember your question. By the way, I knew Michael Jordan. I worked with Michael Jordan, right? I worked
Really?
I worked with the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago Bears and the Chicago Cubs. But so I believe that it goes back to actually what Giulia was asking about taking things personally. So what you're talking about the athletes, it also counts for the police, for example. right? The police are now also sort of a little more afraid because everybody has a camera, right? And everybody's
Right.
showing, and out of context, things can look very different. So everybody feels more judged. Everybody feels more like you can see what I'm doing and you're judging what I'm doing. So it is indeed, so talk about mental health then. How do we get to the point where part of your mental health path takes you to a point where that outside judgment isn't what defines you, right? Because that's really what we need to get to. Look, in my job, I'll make a statement and people will watch this podcast and you will have 100 different commentaries about why I was wrong, right?
Right.
And I cannot allow that to change how I feel about what I said, because I believe, of course, that it's through my experience, through my knowledge, through my point of view, that I know what I'm saying and I know that I stand for what I'm saying, right? So even if you disagree with me, I'm going to listen to you, but it probably is not going to change what I said, right? So you need to get to the point where you're comfortable with the idea that just because there's 100 different opinions out there, or they can even get angry at you for your opinion, it doesn't change that you have your own belief system, that you believe that as long as you're honest, right? As long as your goal is a positive goal, as long as you want good, as long as you want positive results, you should be able to be proud of what you're doing. And I think that that's part of what we're missing. So I agree with you that there's too many eyes on us and there's too many comments out there maybe that makes us more uncomfortable. So generationally, they've been dealing with that more and more. We're always, right, the whole social media puts you in a world where you're waiting for likes. You know, when we were growing up, that wasn't an issue, right? We're not waiting for like 100 people to like what we said.
Not just that, but also it's so much easier for you to compare yourself with others. So in 10 seconds of scrolling,
the FOMO,
you can see other lifestyles of someone that's like 22, 23 doing better than you, and you're 26 and you're like, damn.
What am I doing wrong?
My
Exactly.
WhatsApp caption since I was 16 is comparison is the thief of joy. And I've had that in there as a reminder because I totally think that's true. I also think, going back to what you said, being more comfortable with the idea of like agree to disagree.
Yes.
I don't think we have that right now.
And it's one of my favorite things is to just be able to agree to disagree and still listen to each other.
Right, still be respectful.
But the whole thing we were just talking about, the analogy I use for that and what I learned myself was the yoga mat, because I practice yoga. That's how I balance my life. And
would you recommend it, by the way, yoga?
I recommend it.
It's
when
great
people,
for flexibility.
Yes, it's great for flexibility. Well, it does everything, right? So it helps a little bit with strength, it helps with flexibility, and it gives you sort of that mental moment to be in the moment, which I need. But what I learned from yoga also is what they teach you very much in the beginning is that you practice on your own mat. Right, so I mean, I now do private classes, but I used to do in large classes, and then you would do the same thing. I'm like, oh, I can't do this because look at how much better she is. Look at how much more flexible she is. Oh, she can stand on her head. I can't stand on my head. So it's you feel judged and you feel stupid. You would be in the back of the class, and then you learn the yoga is all about your own mat. It's all about what you can do with your body and your mind on your mat. That's the only thing that matters in yoga. So that applies to everything else in life.
I want to say something. It's not coherent to what you said whatsoever.
That's okay.
Your podcast. 180 pivot.
No, but it's like this quote that I saw yesterday on Instagram as I was scrolling, and I liked it a lot, and I just didn't find a way to work it in today, but I just want to throw it out there because it was interesting to me. Like I said, I watch videos when I eat breakfast or lunch. When I'm driving, I play a podcast. When I'm working out at the gym, it's either an audiobook, podcast, or music. So
Do you sleep?
Do I sleep?
Do you sleep?
Yeah, I sleep.
Okay.
With white noise on in the
I was
background.
just, do
The
you have a
TV
headset on
on.
while you sleep?
No, but yeah, when I sleep, it's quiet, sure.
Okay.
And then sometimes when I shower, sometimes. But what I wanted to say is that in this quote, it says that now with, again, social media and phones, we're constantly consuming so much content that on average, the time that we spend in silence thinking and exploring our deep thoughts is little to none. And then we just end up becoming like these collectors of facts and memories. And then that touched the nerve because I was like, damn, I'm just throwing fun facts around all day. Whoever
there's
I'm
no
speaking to.
thread. There's no connecting of the dots.
Whatsoever.
I actually think it's one of the things I noticed when I came to Aruba in general, that we don't connect dots. So back to the yoga mat analogy. No, we're all on our own little yoga mats and we're never connecting dots. And that's not right either, right? Like you still need to connect dots and be able to share information and put those information in place. Like I'm very aware of that. I feel stressed when, we talked earlier about I feel stressed when I don't have that evening where I can just be by myself. Part of that is to be able for my mind to settle. right? Because I go from one meeting to the next, and it's exactly what you said. You're just gathering facts, and I need time to just let them all settle into their boxes, right? They need to sort of settle into something that makes sense.
But then you just sit in silence, or what do you do?
I was going to say, do you have maybe any tips for people watching that live a stressful or a busy life, what they can do to kind of unwind at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's super. And now I'm curious how you let them settle into their boxes. Like, what do you do? How do you do that?
I believe that that's a process that quiet time gives me. So and quiet time for me is my yoga sessions, for example, right? Cooking, or cleaning the yard, right?
So like
doing
quiet,
something
but
in
not
the
like
yard.
focusing. So not like quiet reading, for example, where you're consuming something.
Right, because then you're just gathering more information
Exactly.
again, right? So for me, it's almost meditative, right? When you're sort of focusing on one thing. Sports is like that too, and golf is like that
Like
too.
a
right?
chore, maybe?
Yeah, it's a chore or a sport because you're focused. With the sport I would go, you're focused on the ball, right? Like you're focusing on that one ball, or a chore like in the garden or a yoga, anything that can just maybe settle your mind. But to be honest, even sleep, which is why I asked you if you sleep, because I believe even sleep. Sometimes if I get a good night's sleep, the next morning things make sense again.
Now that you mentioned sports, I didn't think of sports that way because the way I see you still focus during the match. But I used to, before I had the injury, I used to do sports either 4 or 5 days a week and at least 2-hour sessions, you know? So that was my therapy. Or when you're there, you just think about the ball and the movements, or
Yes.
sometimes it's even like a reflex, so you don't really think.
Everything else
Yeah.
falls off.
Exactly.
I have that as well. I do Latin dancing on Thursdays, and it's the same. I like switch my brain off, and I just enjoy the class.
Yeah, and you're
It's
in the
so
moment.
nice.
You're totally in the moment, and that's what's key.
Yeah. Definitely.
Which men are better at than women, by the way. The in the
Being
moment.
able to shut it off.
And being in the moment, pursuing joy. I've always thought men pursue joy better than women.
I watched the stand-up bit once where the comedian said that a man can have a nothing box.
Oh, I've seen that one.
And it's
It's
a
a
good
very
one.
popular
Where
video.
It's true.
Where he just thinks about nothing, and
Yeah.
for women it's much harder, right?
Yes.
Supposedly.
Yeah, I had somebody say it to me this way. They were, because it's similar to that guy. It was like when men are driving to go to their office, all they're thinking about is they're driving to go to their office.
Sometimes not even the driving, so it's just like blank.
Yeah,
You're on
blank, which
autopilot.
is even, yeah. But then I would lose where I'm going. Women are like, okay, what do I have to do for dinner tonight? And where do I have a meeting tomorrow? Okay, wait, do I still have to buy a dress for that wedding this weekend? I don't know. So we're doing all of those 10 things and we're thinking, whereas the man is just like, I'm going to work.
I have to laugh at this so much because when I drive, I live Paris-Brugge, and when I drive to work with my boyfriend, he'll just sit in silence and he'll drive. Or let's say we're coming back from an event or a party and there was so much going on. I want to debrief. I'm like, let's talk about the party. Like, what did you think? Can you believe this person said that? Or, just to kind of talk about it. And he's just perfectly content driving and I'm
Which
like,
is why they want their cave.
and I'm like, what are you thinking of? And he's like, no, nothing.
Lo que me no gusta yo es la hora. So when I'm driving and then I either pick up my sister or my girlfriend, whoever it may be, and I'm just driving in silence, and they just turn on the Bluetooth and start playing music, and I just want to,
You want to sit in silence?
Yes, exactly.
Then you should drive alone.
But silence is necessary. But you can also do it with music sometimes. Yeah, depends.
Which is funny coming from you because you said, I always listen to podcasts
Sí,
and
sí,
music
sí,
videos,
pero-
and now all of a
pero-
sudden you have someone in your car, you want to sit in silence.
Sí, sí, sí. Look,
He
I
wants
wa-
to choose what he's listening to. That's what it comes
that's
down
what it
to.
is.
He's
It's the music
choosing. You
taste.
want to choose.
Me,
Yeah.
me the bean basi. Either when I drive, it's either I just take calls, so like all the calls that I have pending, or I just sit in silence. Echt leo, like si ta anoche and you're like feeling that vibe, me da toca muziek, but if not, me da gusta drive in silence.
Actually, car is my thinking time. In the pandemic, when we were doing Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, I got major headaches at night because now when you go from a meeting to a meeting, you at least have those few minutes in the car in between where it's like silent. But the Zoom, you would literally switch off one and then switch on the next one, and you had no time with silence. I agree. Silence is important.
Silence is
I'm gonna try and have more silent time right now.
We're going to sit in silence right now for 1 minute. Go.
Pero me também por base lo que Babisa di. So right now, apart from when I drive, and because I can't do sports yet, I think that is like the biggest shift that I had in my routine. So from October to now, present time, I just couldn't do any sports anymore.
You can do yoga.
Yeah. We'll get you a yoga mat.
You can do yoga. I encourage you to try yoga.
Actually, do you know where they have nice yoga at Manchego? They have it at that little in the little gazebo with the sunset. It's actually super nice.
Speaking about yoga, fun fact. Die hoorde me dat bij email de kleuterschool. Cultura mucho antigo sin derivo fluor pia cruza.
No, stop it.
A mí no por así ele.
Oh, so you
you have
okay, this is way before your injury.
Sí, dus die 5 anos dat komt bij email de kleuterschool. Mina bara cruisa mi piene angle A, no bay.
Oh, you mean, I thought because you couldn't sit still.
No.
He
Like,
means putting your leg, which is again why you want yoga.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yoga helps
Flexibility,
you
it'll help.
become more flexible.
See, hip rotatory cuff flexibility. Nasa ko ni.
And I have news for you because you're so young. It only gets harder as you get older.
That's what I was going to say. And you know what also helps with flexibility and mobility? Pilates.
Yes, absolutely. But
It's
Pilates is more
difficult.
strength,
Yes,
training.
as well. But it also helps flexibility. So we gave you some good tips.
I'm down to try yoga.
Not Pilates.
I'll join you.
Okay.
Unda ba to bay? Unda ba to?
Yoga.
Amita sinakas.
Okay. Well, nós estamos com
Mita
session.
invitavo mi casa.
Yeah.
Nós grabamos esse lugar.
No. Private time.
Did you want to cover anything else of a
I
remaining
think this
time?
is a nice way to
I
round
think it's
off,
too.
actually.
Yoga. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna let you do the sign off for practice purposes.
Wait, why? We did not rehearse this at all, mind you.
It's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tisa. Just how I started the episode, thanking you for being on the podcast. I just want to reiterate that and say that again. I had a really fun time. This was my first time doing the podcast with a guest and asking questions. So I really feel like I got a lot of good insight from you. Also, background information about what you do and the industry in general. I think it's just important to throw ideas around and put it online so that people think, oh, there are other people that think like me, or I didn't think about it in this way. And so that's why I think it's cool to do stuff like this. So thank you so much for coming on with us.
It was a pleasure just talking to the two of you. I think you're going to have a very wonderful podcast that you're going to do because you're both very genuine people. You ask really great questions, and it's a nice feeling to be with you too. It's a very nice, casual conversation. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Tisa.
Thank you.